Let's talk about the different types of cell signaling that can operate in multicellular organisms such as ourselves. We're going to divide cell signaling into three distinct categories: direct signaling, paracrine signaling, and endocrine signaling. Let's start with direct signaling. This is where we have direct contact between the signaling cell and the target cell, and it can happen in a few different ways. Juxtacrine signaling takes place when we have direct contact between the ligand and the receptor because the signaling cell and the target cell are in close proximity, close enough that direct physical contact between ligand and receptor is possible. In the cartoon, you can see the signaling cell is expressing a plasma membrane molecule, and the receptor is also expressed on the plasma membrane of an adjacent target cell. Here is one example, the Notch signaling pathway. In this signaling pathway, the Notch receptor is activated when it binds to one of its ligands, called delta, which is also a membrane protein on an adjacent cell. This causes a shape change in Notch, which allows it to be cleaved, or in other words, cut, by a protease enzyme. Part of the intracellular domain of the protein is then released and involved in signal transduction, resulting in changes in gene expression. Another type of direct signaling occurs when two adjacent cells have cell junctions that allow the passage of small molecules from the cytoplasm of one cell to the cytoplasm of the other. This includes plasmodesmata in plant and some algal cells, and septal pores in fungal cells, which are microscopic channels that connect the cytoplasm of two adjacent cells, allowing small molecules to pass through. Animal cells have a similar type of cell-cell junction called a gap junction, in which membrane proteins form a pore that connects the two cells and allows small molecules and ions to pass from cell to cell. The second major type of cell signaling is paracrine signaling. Paracrine signaling takes place when a cell produces a signaling molecule and secretes it out of the cell, where it diffuses through the extracellular matrix and binds to a receptor on a target cell. Recall that diffusion is really only effective over short distances, so paracrine signaling can also be thought of as local signaling. The signaling cell and target cell don't need to be adjacent or touching as in direct signaling, but they do need to be in relatively close proximity. Paracrine signaling is critically important during development as gradients of certain ligands set up the major body axes and help to specify cell fates. We also need to briefly discuss two special types of paracrine signaling, Otocrine signaling and neuronal signaling. Otocrine signaling takes place when the same cell serves as the signaling cell and the target cell. So the ligand is secreted out of the cell and then binds to a receptor on the surface of the same cell. This also occurs during early development as cells are being specified. In the adult organism, otocrine signaling can regulate pain sensation as well as inflammatory response. Neuronal signaling is another special type of paracrine signaling in which a neuron signals to a target cell, usually either another neuron or a muscle cell. Most neurons have long processes called axons, and when an electrochemical signal is propagated down the axon, it stimulates the release of molecules called neurotransmitters, which are stored in vesicles at the axon terminal. When the signal reaches the axon terminal, it stimulates the vesicles to fuse with the plasma membrane, and then neurotransmitters are secreted into the synaptic cleft, which is the space between the neuron and its target cell. They then bind to receptors on the target cell where they can mediate a response. Finally, endocrine signaling takes place over relatively long distances. Endocrine cells produce signaling molecules called hormones, which travel through the bloodstream and make their way to a distant target cell. Hormones aren't one particular type of molecule, they are simply another name for endocrine signals. Hormones include small modified amino acids, peptides, which are short chains of amino acids, proteins, steroids, which are lipids, eicosanoids, which are derived from fatty acids, and even gases such as nitric oxide and ethylene. These different types of signaling, direct, paracrine, and endocrine, give organisms fantastic versatility in how they coordinate cell function within a complex multicellular structure.